Well, hello, everybody. This is Craig Violante. I am the CFO of the King County Housing Authority, and I'm also the president of NOG. And I'm pleased to be able to offer today a chance for NOG members to see a product that we've been really thrilled with here at KCHA. It's called Spreadsheet Server. It's made by a company called Global Software, and as I said a little bit in my introduction when I sent out, it's sort of a cross between browser and accelerator. And we've had just a lot of success with it. We've basically converted all of our reporting over to Spreadsheet Server, and we're in the process of converting all of our budgeting sheets over to Spreadsheet Server. So we've just been a huge fan of it. So I am now going to turn the webinar over to Bjorn Beer, who is the works for Global Software. He's the Director of Strategic Account Development. And Bjorn, I'm going to let you take it away.
Well, Craig, thank you so much for setting this up. Thank you for your for using Spreadsheet Server, and thanks for all the folks who have taken the time today to join us with NOG. My name is Bjorn Beer, and I work with many of our strategic partners and alliances, and I look forward to helping you evaluate your Excel automation needs and the processes you're doing today. We're joined by Kevin Gibson, and he's actually going to be doing the bulk of the talking before we pass things back to Craig. But Kevin actually comes from a public accounting background himself, and in a past life, he was a user of Spreadsheet Server. So we certainly encourage you, if you're able to chat, send us questions throughout the webinar. If it allows you, feel free to send us questions, and we'll answer them the best we can. Kevin will be stopping at various points of the presentation. And I will be putting my email address up and contact information, so you can always email me questions during the presentation. We want to make sure that we answer all of your questions. So I just want all of you to know who we are. We are a Microsoft partner. Global Software has been in business since the 70s, and now our mainstay, our bread and butter, is helping clients get live data from various systems in Microsoft Excel. So all of you on the call, I'm sure, are very heavy Excel users. And what we're doing is allowing you to get that live data from UBW, Agresso, Unit4, etc., all in an environment you know and love, Microsoft Excel. So what you're going to be seeing today is a solution that Craig has already alluded to that he's using there at King County. Spreadsheet Server is the umbrella term for all the functionality you're going to see today. So short version is live data in Microsoft Excel. You don't have to copy and paste data anymore. You can do ad hoc report generation all from within Excel, and you can have that drill down capability. So reformatting every month or week, quarter, all that is eliminated, and you'll enjoy the same formatted spreadsheets but with live data. So when you see Kevin's demo, I want you to imagine your current spreadsheets, but with every cell of the spreadsheet brought to life with live data. We're also going to talk briefly about Distribution Manager, which automates the distribution of reports in various file formats. For some clients, that's the icing on the cake, and for other clients, that is the cake. So we'll certainly talk about that as well. So I won't read all of these quotes, but I just want to summarize them for you. A common theme amongst all of our clients is time savings, time savings, time savings. Everybody reports that when we ask them, why they love our solutions, it's time savings and the elimination of headaches of getting data to Excel. But a couple other points I want to bring up. We also free up the accounting and finance and Excel users to not have to rely on IT for every single report. That's a big thing. Also, more accurate spreadsheets as well. So accuracy is another non-qualitative benefit or non-quantitative benefit that's going to be really helpful as well. So I'm not going to steal any of Craig's thunder. He's going to be diving into King County Housing Authority's use of Spreadsheet Server after Kevin gives a high-level overview. But I just want to point out, we're talking about some serious time savings here. Craig will speak to that more directly. But again, a couple things that stick out in what he's told us about his usage. The ability to extract data in Excel, customizable, that's a word that came up. being able to drill down and having an instant analysis. So really more time spent on things that he likes to do and less time spent on manual processes. We're going to talk about the various license levels of Spreadsheet Server. We're going to start by showing you what's pre-configured plug and play out of the box. And then we'll talk about briefly about the ability to go after non-general ledger data. We won't get into that in too much depth because we don't have time, but you can always reach out to us for a follow-up demo. And we're also going to finish by talking about Distribution Manager very briefly. So if you have any questions or want a free Excel automation and best practices review session in the coming weeks, definitely reach out to me. You see my number here and my email address. And also during the presentation, if you have questions, you should be able to chat them through the GoToWebinar box here on the right-hand side. But if that doesn't work for some reason, you can always email me during the presentation, bjorn.beer@globalsoftwareinc.com, and then I can stop Kevin and make sure he answers your questions. So again, thanks for joining us. And Kevin, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Bjorn. Again, my name is Kevin Gibson. I'm going to guide you through this process here this afternoon with our discussion of Spreadsheet Server. Again, the idea today is to give you a quick high-level overview of the product. There's a lot of functionality here. I'm not going to be able to get to all of it. We won't be able to demonstrate every single piece that we provide, but we're going to hit on some of the high points. Being a former user myself, I'm going to speak directly against how we use the product. There's a multitude of ways to do that. Remember, this is Excel. Everything that we do is Excel-based. So every single Excel function, charts and graphs and borders and colors and pivot tables and VLOOKUPs, and every single Excel ribbon that you're used to viewing today will still exist. We're just going to combine that with live data. If you match the two pieces of functionality together, one of the examples is right here on your screen. Now, this is just an income statement. We're going to talk about how we built it. We're certainly going to talk about how we use it, but ultimately, it can be any data, not only against your source of record, against your general ledger, but any module that you may be using, fixed assets, accounts payable, accounts receivable, maybe even other data connections. So it's not just limited to one source of information. You can pull from multiple sources into the same spreadsheet and or template if you would so choose to do that. Now, our product, which is called Spreadsheet Server, is just an add-in to Excel. If you look at the top of the screen, there is now a new ribbon that sits right alongside all of those other Excel ribbons that brings some new functionality into the workbook. Now, as I mentioned, we're not going to go through every single button here. We're going to hit some of the highlights, such as the drill down and how you build reports. And Bjorn also mentioned the distribution capability. That's going to give you sort of a feel of what we do, but you're going to quickly see that the live data in these reports is refreshable, it's drillable, and then certainly distributable to anyone who needs to have it. Now, when I go through this presentation today, I'm going to focus on this ribbon, and I'm going to show you certain functions that apply to the workbook. That means if you want to be able to have this type of functionality, you have to have that ribbon. That functionality will go hand in hand, but that's why we introduced the Distribution Manager capability, which allows you to be able to send the data to anyone who needs to see it. Internal or external, Excel, PDF, live, or static. We'll show you those options, and therefore the reports are not just one-dimensional. Your audience is literally anyone who needs to see it. Now, inside of every template that we'll talk about, you will notice there will be two sets of information that relate directly to that ribbon. The first will be a set of parameters. Now, parameters ultimately can be anything. The parameters are what filter the data. So notice over here on the right-hand side, I have a parameter set of company, department, month, and year. Parameters can be located anywhere in a template. And as I mentioned, you can have one, you can have as many as you need, and ultimately you can use anything to filter. The more parameters you have, the more specific the data that's being returned. In my example, I have a company 1, department 410 for the month of June for the year 2007. If I want to modify those, I have a couple of options. I can just start typing right in the cell, and if I hit enter, you will notice the words value or pending that appear in the spreadsheet. All that simply means is I've just refreshed my template with new data. Again, I don't have to have anything else open. I'm not data dumping. There's not a pivot table that's being run in this spreadsheet off of other data in another tab that I've got here today. This is a live connection, which leads me to the next component in every spreadsheet. These parameters work hand in hand with a formula. Now, if I click inside of any cell in this template, you will notice this formula in the formula bar. Now, that formula relates directly to Spreadsheet Server. You will not find that as a standard Excel function. That formula is the direct connection to your data. There's no additional hardware, there's no server, there's no data warehouse in between our product and your information. It's a direct connection, and that formula will do that. So as I was modifying those parameters, it triggered that formula to go out and grab the new information as requested. Now, if you want to continue to keep filtering off this information, you can. The next way to select a parameter is an Excel drop-down list. It's not a requirement, but we even utilize a wildcard, which is this asterisk symbol that's highlighted in blue. If you select that as a standalone, you'll notice another recalculation, and now I'm going to pull in all departments into my template here in just a few seconds. So again, the user just takes advantage of what's in the template. You recalculate, you update as often as you want. Once these reports are built, they are always built for you to use. Again, you can even share them among the other users of the product and then ultimately send them out to whoever needs to see them. Now I'm going to focus on that formula for just a moment. So that formula now is the key to being able to drill further into the detail or use a lot of the other functions that you see here on the ribbon. Now, one of those is that drill down option. So if the formula is there, the drill down is there. If I want to focus on that repair and maintenance category or any other category in the template, all I have to do is select the option and drill further into the information. Now notice the panel that appears on the screen. I can start analyzing the information a little further. Remember, I wildcarded the department just a few moments ago. So in this case, I've got all my different departments I have access to in the template, the different account numbers that made up that category called repair and maintenance, which will show you how we create those, and then ultimately the balances that make up that information. Now, if I want to filter off the data, I can start filtering off the different categories. So if I want to click on the amount, it will sort it by dollar value. If you want to click on and sort alphabetically, you can even drag these little department descriptions or different descriptions or headers as you see them here, right above where they sit, and it will start grouping that data together. If you would like to see it by department and or account, you absolutely can. And then that lowest level of information is still intact in the template. Change the order, change the grouping. You get the idea, it's very flexible. Drag these back into the panel, and you can even move them around. If you want the department on the left-hand side, you want to move the description, again, you create a layout that fits the user's needs. Each person can have their own drill down panel. Now, we can also drill further. We're not limited on the access to the data. We don't want you to have to go back from Excel back to the general ledger and keep completing the process. Everything can be done in the templates. If you notice a little black arrow that's right here in my panel, if I double click on it, I can go into the next level of detail, which in this case is the journals and or transactional data. The two drill downs that I'm showing you come with the product. You don't have to create them. All you have to do is simply use them. If the formula is there, the drill down's there. But I also want to add, with our product capabilities, we can drill further into detail. We can go into the subledgers, such as this is an expense transaction. I want to follow this all the way through. I want to drill into the AP module. I want to see vendor information. Maybe I want to drill into an invoice image. If you have that information stored electronically, then we can grab it. If I were to double click again, we'll introduce a term called a query. And when I highlight that, you'll notice it says AP or AR. I even have different data connections. So again, it allows me to really analyze wherever it is sitting and however I want it to appear in the template, even being able to, again, to get to those images if necessary. So what we're talking about is the ability now to just create reports. Once they're set up, they're always set up. So that also means that this can be used to create annual reports, monthly reports, board reports, again, CAFRs, all that information that sits in there. I was heavily involved in that space for a very long time. My previous life, I was an auditor. I know the challenges of getting all that data together, and then you have to walk back through that process. It takes a lot of time. But if you had standardized templates, how great would it be just to come in here next month, next year, change the parameter that drives the data, and now you have your new information. Now, we're going to talk about that formula here in a little more in depth. We're going to get into how you create it, how you build it, how you lay out the information. I just want to reiterate, any questions or comments that you have, please submit those through the chat box. We will monitor those. And I'm actually going to take a moment now to pause to see if there are any questions that are out there. And again, that's a little question feature within inside of the window bar here today that we're using. And between Bjorn and Craig and I will certainly check those. And I'm just going to pause. Craig or Bjorn, are there questions out there that we can answer so far?
One of the first questions is, how does Spreadsheet Server connect back to UBW, which is, of course, it's Aggresso's business world.
Sure. So generically speaking, most of our connections are what they call ODBC connections, ODBC, Open Database. So that connection is established one time. We help you set that up. Once that connection is there, all the users will take advantage of it. You don't have to set it up for every user. It's a one-time install, one-time setup, one-time connection, and then each user will need this ribbon in order to point to it in order to pull the data. So that connection uses SQL as a back-end language to pull the data. You don't have to know SQL when using this product. It's just using that in order to create the reports that you see on the screen.
And the second question is whether this supports what's called data control. Data control is a feature in Unit4 Business World whereby, based on configuration settings, you can say a user, Joe Smith, we know he's in the finance department, therefore he can only see reports that are related to the finance cost center. I mean, you can be set up in a lot of different ways, but that's the sort of the concept of data control.
Sure. And the answer is yes, it can be. So there's a couple of ways to answer that. I'll give you both of those briefly. We can always dive a little deeper into that on a separate call just for the folks that need to understand that information. But what we try to do first and foremost is read I'll call it security is the language that I'm going to use here. We try to read and establish the security within your system today. Now, in the event that we can't do that, we have the ability with inside of our product to add additional security. Now, you've got an individual on the call today. You're lucky enough that Craig understands how all that works and how he's using it. So the restrictions are there. We can control what a person can get to, when they can get to it. And absolutely, that's the first aspect of the product. Just because it's Excel, we don't want to lose that security setup that's there. And then again, ultimately, we can establish more if necessary.
Will this work in Business World Cloud? And that's the version of Unit4 Business World where it is being hosted somewhere in the cloud as opposed to being hosted on the client site.
Sure. So again, the answer to that question can be we have a lot of customers that have hosted environments today. The only requirement that we have to understand, and this is a general statement for all hosted or cloud environments, is that we have to be able to get to the data. As I mentioned, we have partnerships today with certain ERPs or certain partnerships with other individuals that host a lot of data that they grant us the access to be able to pull that information. So as long as an example, as long as a VPN can be established, some companies use a term called a private cloud where it's specifically for your data. We access a lot of those different environments today, so absolutely, we can use those as channels to get to your information.
Another question is whether this can be installed on a Citrix server.
Yes, as a matter of fact, this morning I just wrapped up a presentation where with a current customer, we were working with them getting set up on some additional features, and they have a Citrix environment, and that's not the only customer. We have a lot that utilize that. In today's environments, there's more than one way to set it up. You don't have to just do the desktop install. Certainly virtual machines, Citrix environments, and everything in between will work.
Yeah, here at KCHA, we have Citrix, and we do have it installed on there. I'm not sure we've got things set up as efficiently as we maybe could. That's something we're going to have to talk about, having our IT department get a hold of Global Software's IT department figure out, but it absolutely does work on Citrix. Another question, does each user need to install Spreadsheet Server? I guess maybe that means like separately, or is there like a master installation?
So the answer is depending on your deployment. So there are a couple of ways to do that as well. Ultimately, each user will need this ribbon in some form or fashion. They'll need to have access to it. So in my case, it's just one simple install. I'm the only user of the product in my environment. Now, if you have a global installation, as we do with our customer base and actually with employees themselves, we can do a silent install. We can push that out behind the scenes. Therefore, you don't have to go to each individual user's laptop or desktop machine and install it. It can be pushed out behind the scenes, and therefore getting them up and running much quicker, much easier. So either one works.
There's another question. Another feature within UBW is called roles, and it's essentially a permission. Permission. It's if someone's in a particular role, maybe accounts payable or something, they have rights to do certain things, and it's a configurable table. And the question is whether that could be whether the Spreadsheet Server could access roles in UBW.
I'll come back to the first question and say, in most cases, yes, we can. Again, looking at each individual setup per customer and per connection that they're making, we will be able to replicate your existing features and structures. The roles specifically, I may need to dig a little bit deeper into that. My guess is the answer to that is yes, because we connect over 150 different ERPs today, and we're able to establish those security restrictions as you had them defined. There's no reason for me to believe we couldn't continue that process. As Craig's using it today, I'm not sure if he's using roles or not, but those are the things that we consider and we understand, and we make that option available within the product.
Next question. How does this product compare with Microsoft Power BI? Which I don't even know what that is, so I'll let you take that one.
You're fine. And that's actually, we're I would say that Power BI would be more of a complement to our product. What we provide first and foremost out of the box is pre-built, pre-configured content to be able to pull your information and your data. What Power BI brings to the table is the ability to create additional dashboards and take that information and create maybe a more visual effect of what you're trying to present, I guess from a presentation perspective. So with the data that you see here, we're leveraging Excel. Power BI now can leverage Spreadsheet Server's functionality of pulling that information into, again, whether it's a financial statement or any other type of data layout that you create with our product. You can put Power BI on top of it and certainly complement it and take it to the next level. We just had our annual kickoff or sales meeting for Global Software, the company in Raleigh, and we're introducing that now as part of our presentations because we understand a lot of Power BI users out there. They need live data. We now can get that component, that information, and I would say they both complement each other as far more than they would compete against each other.
Kevin, if I could just back that thought too, I just want to tell all the folks on the line for that question or any other questions. The Power BI one, we can certainly do a follow-up demo, and we can actually show you how they could work together. So just send me an email when I flash my email up there again, and we can be sure to do a follow-up with you or send you more information.
Next question is, how is the performance with large underlying data sets? The drill down you had showed only a small sample.
Yes, so that's a good question. So I guess at this point I can name drop a little bit. We have a multitude of customers across many platforms, whether it's the not-for-profit, the governmental area, to manufacturing, and some Fortune 50 companies. Companies like Hershey's and Coca-Cola and PepsiCo, Frito-Lay, use our product. They have very, very large data sets. And with the way the product is driven, we know how to integrate with the data. We know how to maximize the return and response rates. We actually have minimum standards that we require with our product against all the different connections that we make. So to be more specific about that, the volume of data doesn't concern us as much because we can build reports and ways to return as much as you want. And the drill downs, you're right, as I'm showing you, we're limited on our test databases. These are the databases that the partners, the ERPs and the large corporations provide to us to use. But we have customers pulling hundreds of thousands of lines of information into Excel, and they're doing it much faster than their current process. In almost all cases, if not every case, they will see increased performance not only in the returning of data into spreadsheets, but it's a less of a burden on their ERP because of the way that we perform and pull and be able to filter through that information in a much faster scale.
Next question, is it possible to set up user or role-based security? I think we've mostly handled that. I'm assuming that question was in the context of the users or roles that are already set up in Unit 4. But let me ask the question, if for some reason someone was not using that in Unit 4 at all, are there particular roles or security within Spreadsheet Server itself that somebody could leverage?
Yes, inside of the product itself, Craig, we can even restrict people down to an individual account number. So we can be very, very specific. So even in this template itself, if I've got the wild card here and I'm only allowed to see Department 410, I can't trick the system. So we can go in per user. So on a role-based responsibility, if you will, we absolutely can apply additional criteria and or restrictions even if you don't have anything in place or leveraging what you have today and just want to expand on it. All parts of the application can be restricted so users cannot get to data that they couldn't previously get to if they exactly logged right in just to try to, again, into their direct system, into their account analysis or something. They're only going to be restricted to the same access point.
Okay, next question. Let's see, is the data on the screen pulling from an Agresso balance table? And I think the answer there is no. This isn't what we're seeing here is not Agresso. When I'm going to be showing and doing my part of the demo, I'm going to be showing live data pulling directly from an Agresso balance table. And then the second part of the question is, my understanding was that Unit 4 did not give access to the SQL database. So will this work? I'm not quite sure I understand that question. What I can say is I'm definitely pulling from a balance table that I can drill down into underlying data. If I'm not sure if that answers the question from Alan. If not, Alan, maybe you can send a further question.
Well, maybe to expand on that just a little bit, the ODBC connection is what allows us to be able to pull that data directly from the system. So it's a simple ODBC connection we make that allows us to grant a SQL call to it. Now, as we get a little further into this, and we won't have time today, we actually have a query building capability that allows you to create your own SQL, if you will, or create your own tables and joins within the queries themselves. So that's probably would be more of a customized presentation. Back to Bjorn's point, we don't mind jumping on calls. Craig's a great example. He's using our product today connected directly against his data. So we absolutely can get to it. And then it's just a matter of using it through Excel.
Then there's a question from Liz. We currently use the Unit4 Accelerator add-in. How does this product compare? And I'll just say briefly, for us, the biggest difference is Accelerator pulls data and just populates the spreadsheet, and that's it. This allows you to further drill down into the data to see where the results, what's making up the results, and I'll hopefully get a chance to show you that in my portion of the demo. I think it'll become clearer then of what Spreadsheet Server has added a certain level of power to us. And then the last two questions we have right now both relate to the cloud. Again, there's a question of whether it works in the cloud. But there's a further question from Mario saying there's currently a perception that people in the cloud are not supposed to have connection to the database. That's not something I was aware of. We're not in the cloud here at KCHA. I was not aware that if you're in the cloud that you're not supposed to have a connection to the database. So I'm not sure I can answer that. Anything you can add on that, Kevin?
Well, Craig, all I would add is back to my comment about when it comes to the cloud connection, it's that you'll need to speak to whoever's hosting it to see if they'll grant the connection. Again, we have customers out there in the cloud space on different ERPs, and we have an established relationship and a dedicated access point for those customers. Each company is a little different. Each ERP is a little different in granting that information. So you'll need to understand more from who's hosting the data to see if they'll grant that to you. In all cases, the answer is not always yes. It just depends. As an example, ADP Payroll is a great hosted environment payroll product. They will not grant us access into ADP payroll data. We've tried. We wanted the partnership with them. So that one is just not going to be available as an example. So they're case by case when it comes to hosted cloud environments.
All right, well, we're caught up on the questions for now, Kevin.
Okay. Well, Craig, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of, just looking at the time here, I want to make sure the presentation needs to be a lot about what you're doing here today. I'm going to show a building of a report just briefly. We'll get into the distribution manager if we have time, but I want to make sure that you have enough time and certainly leaving time for questions. So I'm just going to switch over here and I'm going to build a report. I'm going to show folks how this build a template interacts with data. And then I think it'd be best if we went over to your side just so they can get a chance to take a look at how you're using it against your information. That sound okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Now, for the folks that understand the finished product is obviously great. We want to get into more information. This build a template now is the ability to create formulas and create reports. Now, again, we're going to touch on this briefly. We always dive deeper on presentations for specific prospects. But understand that there's an interaction with the data that allows you to be able to create different types of reports. Now, on the left-hand side, there's a formula column that says GL. There's also formulas that say query. Ultimately, what the query formulas do is they allow you to create queries against any area of data. Multiple connections, multiple tables, multiple ledgers if you need them. Absolutely, queries are very powerful when it comes to where's the data sitting and how do you want to report on it. Now, on the general ledger side, you'll notice the panel takes a different shape because the general ledger is pretty set in its form. Now, you might add new parameters, you might add new account numbers within a segment of your general ledger, but the structure of the general ledger remains constant. Now, to compare that to a query, queries can always change. A query against AP is going to be different than a query against AR. They're going to use different ways to filter the data. So that's why you see predefined information inside of this panel. Now, when you get to Craig's information, his build a template will look different than mine because he has a different setup. He has a different way that he's accessing his information down to the different segments that he might have on his general ledger. So this product is very customizable. Who customizes that? We do. And then we provide it to you as a completed product. But we also allow you the ability to create your own queries if you need to. So very flexible depending on the audience and the users of the product. Now, inside the GL formula, there are parameters that you answer, and then you insert them into the spreadsheet. What worksheet do you want to use? It defaults to the tab that you're on. To being able to access different balance types. Now, A stands for actual, B stands for budget. So I can pull in all the budgets, forecasts, and plans. So when you're creating a budget roll forward report or you need to compare budget versus actual, out of the box, we can create that type of functionality. The year, self-explanatory, that's just a year of data, or you can just type in what you want to see. Formatting, periods, quarters, year-to-date, life-to-date, and ranges. And then the period just represents the month you want to start with. Now, again, I'm running a database example here that's wide open. I've got information related to different currencies and how is it translated. In most cases, our customers don't need that, but some of them do. So we have the capabilities to present it. Most of you will stop right here at the period level and will not even see these remaining segments listed, these different parameters. So that's where the customization comes in, which will lead me directly from the period right down to the segments I'm using. Now, I have 5 segments. We have customers that have upwards of 20 segments that they filter on in their general ledger. You can have a company that only has 1 segment. There's no minimum and there's no maximum. We'll read what you have today, and in some cases, we can even break the segments down further, where you can take a 1-segment string that the first 2 digits mean account number, the next 3 mean department, and so on, and we can break those out into individual filtering components. So a lot of flexibility, again, here for the product. Row versus column. All that means is will the data go up and down or left to right in the spreadsheet? The value column, where you see that asterisk symbol, remember that's the wild card, so I just want to start filtering on it. By filtering, all you're doing is typing in what you want to see, sort of like an account inquiry screen. The range, that allows me to check that box and put an ending account number in. So company 1, department 410, 7400 through 7600. Now, the last option where it says line description, you just type in what category you just created. Now, by hitting insert, There's that complicated formula. Here are all the parameters, and now this is just Excel. Copy and paste, modify. So if you want to pull in a quarter and you want to compare it to year to date, and you want to drop in just an Excel variance, all you have to do is do that. It's just Excel that we're using now. Wherever you want to key in the new filters, even different years of data, you absolutely can. If you want to type in a range, you want to type in 3 different departments in the spreadsheet. And just to show you that it's working correctly, I can drill down. I can see departments 410, 420, 430. From here forward, how much Excel? How many rows and columns of data do you want to apply to the template? As much as you want to add, we will allow you to do it, and as many categories as you want to create, you absolutely can. So now it's a matter of just pulling that data. Helps if I can spell expenses correctly. It's just a matter of you putting the information in the right categories, the right groupings, charts and graphs and borders and colors. The only difference between this template and the profit and loss is really just the user's imagination. There are a few more buttons. I'm going to mention one more, and then I'll pause again, and I think, Craig, we'll turn it back to you, so we'll leave you enough time. There's an expand and collapse button here. By selecting that option, I want you to know it will pull in all of the accounts that fall within that range and their associated balances with a formula still intact. So now that variance column of 72,000 is broken down into its individual components. I can drill down at this level, again, all the way into the invoice image if I need to be able to do that. The collapse button just rolls it right back up. So from report creation, we've shown you how a report looks on a finished, completed side that you can modify, to also just briefly mentioning the distribution capabilities. We are able to distribute reports to anyone who needs to see them. You can convert the formulas out of the spreadsheet. We can schedule when reports need to be distributed. It's part of the ribbon. Because we're talking about a specific functionality, not everyone's going to have it. So introducing this element of the ribbon allows you to be able to distribute reports, again, to anyone who needs access to the information, whether it's an Excel, PDF, live, or static. So I think at this point, again, questions through the chat box. But Craig, I want to make sure that they get to see how you're using it today, because that's now going to complete the process of, well, this is how you created it. Now let's see how you're actually applying it in real life and real use. Okay. So I'm going to switch back to you. And if there are more questions, again, we will certainly answer those.
Yeah, there were a few questions that I see I missed on the first go round. Actually had it sorted incorrectly, so I missed some. One of the questions is whether the data can go both ways. In other words, this is pulling data out of Agresso. Can data actually be uploaded into the ERP?
Not with the tool that we're showing you here. Spreadsheet Server is only a reporting tool. It's a read-only grabbing of the data. At no point will you see the ability to write back. Now, there is a write back option you'll see in my ribbon, but that's specific to an Oracle and a JD Edwards database. So it will not apply to the audience that we have today.
There's another question about whether you can report on what's called in UBW, it's called flexi fields on master file tables. And a flexi field it's an add-on table that allows you to put additional information or record additional information in a master file. So I'll give you an example of how we use one here at KCHA. We have one attribute called property, and it's an attribute that we actually post to the general ledger. Attached to that, we have a lot of flexi fields where we can put the year the property was built, what congressional district it's in, a whole bunch of stuff, and it's just all part of the relational database. So I think the question is whether or not these queries can be written to drill down and gain access to this data that is associated with portions of the accounts.
I'm going to use just a generic response there. And when I say generic, it's because the answer is yes. Once we're connected in, all the data within inside of the system is accessible by our product. And there's different ways to report on it. We can report off of hierarchies, as we call them generically within, because a lot of people, like even in the PeopleSoft space, they're called trees. In Oracle, they're called parent-child hierarchies. So I'm going to use hierarchies as a generic term. The answer is yes, we can. We can pull that data in. You can use things like a locate a segment to recognize. Matter of fact, here's that hierarchy term over here on the right-hand side that allow us to read roll-ups or grouped definitions. We also have the ability with inside the product itself called a segment list to create your own if you would like. There's a multitude of ways to address that, even being able to do lookups against the data. So if I want to go out and pull in and see information related to a vendor number, I can go out and pull in that information, vendor number, vendor name, and pull that directly into my spreadsheet, creating lookups, if you will, or roll-ups against your information. So just a couple of examples, but yes, we absolutely can do that.
Then the last question is, actually there's a new one. The second to the last question is, how long does it take to do a typical setup? And then there's a question about approximate pricing. I don't know whether you want to get into pricing questions or not, Bjorn, but the question is, how long does a typical setup take?
Well, and I'll cover that from the setup take. It's very simple because there's no additional hardware. We do this via WebEx. Well, we have 4,500 plus customers. That's customers today, not users. That when we install, because of the hardware list component to this, so again, just an add-in to Excel, it takes about a 90-minute process. Now, it usually goes a little quicker than that, usually done with under an hour, but we just target that 90-minute window. To get you installed, you instantly can build reports after the installation against your live information. Now, as far as pricing, that's going to be specific for a customer because we drive it by the number of users you have. So we can't get too specific on that today. What I would tell you is we can reach out we'll put Bjorn's information back up on the screen, and then he can reach out to you directly, talk through the number of users or the use case, and then we can formalize or develop some type of pricing for you.
Absolutely, and we're very straightforward and candid with pricing. So on a subsequent call, we'd explain the 3 license levels, figure out what your needs are, and we're really good about getting a quote right back to you. So sorry to punt on that question, but we certainly can dive into that on a subsequent call.
And I just want to add about setup. I think how long a setup would take is also somewhat going to be dependent on how much a user really does want to use flexi fields or other relationships you have set up, because as you all know, one of the benefits of UBW is just its power in configuration, and everybody can configure things a little bit differently, and not everybody does things the same way. And so they'd have to understand your particular setup and then do some configuration to get what you need. So far, there's been nothing they haven't been able to do, but I just want to make that clear that it's because UBW is very much configurable. I think it's going to take a little bit of time depending on what all you want to do. And then the last question we have so far is, can this pull from multiple modules? In other words, you're demoing General Ledger. Can actually data be pulled, say, from a payroll module?
The answer is yes. Again, once we're connected in, again, just a few examples: fixed assets, accounts payable, purchase orders, payroll, you name the module. If the data's there, we can grab it. It's just not financial specific information.
All right, and that's it on the questions we have for right now.
Well, Craig, I'm going to switch this to you unless you can grab it, but I'm going to just click on you as the presenter.
Okay.
And we would love to see how you're using it in your world today.
All right. What I'm going to be pulling over, what we're looking at here, this is what we call our cash spreadsheet. This is how we used to do things. Before I get too much into detail here, what I also need to show you is, okay, our chart of accounts. So here at KCHA, and you all know how this works in the GL. Our account is the main segment. Then we have 7 other attributes. For our cash accounting, we actually utilize our account number. We utilize something we call a restriction type, and we utilize a portion of what we call our funding source segment. All 3 of these get combined to be able to create this cash report. So what we used to do is break our cash out by what we had invested in, in our state pool, something a lot of governments have states in their state that they can invest in. whether we have things in an outside investment or whether we had various other cash accounts. We also then had information on the nature of the cash, whether it was restricted, whether it was technically unrestricted but had to be used within a specific program, whether we had dedicated cash programs, whether it was actually restricted, and then different programs. So we had it broken out a lot of different ways. And what we used to have to do was we did a bunch of sum ifs formulas. And so, we could pull this up and we'd be able to, I could pull it up for any period and it would populate. But to get there, first I had to download data from, I had a browser set up. I would then take that information and I would cut and paste it over in here. And then I had a bunch of other segments over here or data that would, based on criteria, that would populate these fields over here. So over here was the data I would pull from Agresso. Here's other fields that were calculated, and then the sum ifs would do all this work to come up with it. So bottom line is, at some point if I needed to know, well, gosh, this number looks really, really weird, where's that coming from? I had to go through and remember, okay, I got to go back and look at, and this is for those of you that are familiar with sum ifs, hopefully most of you are, I had to go and look to see, okay, which of my restrictions were one, and which fund groups were this, and cash type this, and it took a lot of time to be able to go and troubleshoot if something did not look right. So the report is basically does the same thing. I have the exact same thing, but all of my definitions are now over here. And it took some time to get it set up, but everything is now pre-set up. And so if I now suddenly say, gosh, this number looks weird, and to me, for me personally, this is one of the big differences between this and an accelerator. If I want to know what's going on here, I can just go over here and drill down, and it's going to tell me what are the accounts that are making that up. And in this case, it tells me that it comes from these four different funds. Here's the balances. It makes my analysis. On this one report, it probably saves me 75% of the time that I used to spend trying to verify this. One of the other complicating pieces of this is when we had cash amounts that we would set aside internally for specific purposes or were restricted by outside entities, we would have detail of what are these various buckets of funds out there for. And this is where we used our Dimension 6, our funding source. So now I can go and say, okay, we have $78 million of amounts that are dedicated. What makes that up? I have all the definitions pre-set up here based on these funding source codes, and it'll then tell me everything that goes into these. So again, if I want to say, well, I want to know what are my total, what's making up my excess cash reserves. And I see I have excess cash reserves. I could go over into UBW and do a query and figure all that out. Or I can just do a drill down and I can see, oh, that's right, it's made up of these three funds. I remember what that is. And I get questions like that all the time. And this goes to the board with, our board of commissioners every quarter. And this has just been a huge, huge time saving for me. And as Kevin mentioned, one of the other real benefits for us, I think I mentioned that one of the things, the way we divide our cash report up is by account number. So we used to have to go and figure out how to manually or have the sum ifs account for all that. I can now go over to a segment list. And you see, this is called basically a segment list. You give a name, like a shortcut name, to some particular grouping. This is called cash rep pool accounts. So I can go and look that up. What is cash rep pool accounts? And it just so happens that it's here, and it just tells me that this is made up of these two accounts. So the whole point here is that if you've got a lot of different disparate type accounts or however you're using your chart of accounts, you can predefine those here. So in other words, if you've got a fund and you want to say, well, this particular fund or this particular fund is made up of 16 different funds and there's no rhyme or reason to those numbers, you can go here and you can list them all separately, and now you can just call them, the main operating fund. And all you then have to type in is main operating fund here, rather than having to go into your definition and type in 16 different funds, which you certainly can do. So this is just an example of how we are using it. And as I mentioned, this is saved for us enormous amounts of time. And there's another. This is an example of one we used for budget purposes. We actually have 12 different. We have about 350 different funds that we deal with. They all get rolled up into one of 12 fund groups. And so here I'm able to have the definition of what's in one particular fund group. And while here we then have combined data from our 2016 actual. This is pulling from our balance table. 2017 is pulling from our balance table. This one's pulling from a balance table through, well, this particular one is through September. Budget actual through September from the balance table. But then I can also break down the individual funds that make this up, so that with just a glance here, I can easily look to say, for tenant revenue, this $5.8 million, what's making that up? So it has just been for us personally, it's been a huge time saver for me and for everybody. And other thing I'll just mention is I don't personally know how to do it. My financial reporting team uses the distribution manager all the time. That particular function alone has probably saved them 90% of the time. We report on, I'm trying to remember, something like 60 different properties where we have to create a monthly budget versus actual reports, and they used to have to go and create those all manually in Excel and then sort them and then email them all out to different property managers. And one property manager might get 3 and another one might get 4. A regional manager would get a group of those. It's all pre-set up now, and just basically a couple of clicks of the button, those all just get distributed out right away. It's been really, really huge. So let's see. Just a couple questions that have come in. Let's see. Are custom lists spreadsheet server specific? Yes. So in this particular case, the one that I call the cash rec pool, that's completely user defined. I just went through and defined those. Let me go back up to the segment list here. These are all of the various segment lists that are basically shortcuts that we have set up. So one of the reports that we have to file, it's a regulatory report. It's called the Financial Data Schedule, FDS. It's something we have to report to HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development on. And HUD has their own specific numbering system, basically their own specific chart of account. And it basically, this is a crosswalk then. So for what HUD calls FDS line 113, we've gone through and we've defined that it's made up of these accounts. So completely user defined. So basically all they have to do is run it. It pulls everything from Agresso. It combines it in these, the way we've got it defined here, and gives reports. And I know that has saved my financial reporting manager, oh gosh, he's probably saved, I think, well, let me put it this way. It used to be an annual process that would take him a couple days to come up with the first draft. We're to the point now where we could run interim FDS reports with about 2 hours worth of work. The pull is right there. The pull is quick. There's still some kind of off-book adjustments we have to make. So it still takes a couple hours, but we can do that on an interim basis now, where it used to take 2-3 days just to do it once a year, and that allows us to find issues where we had some coding problems. When we do want to file the HUD, we don't want there to be issues. We want to make sure we see it well. So that alone has been just a huge time saver for us. Let's see. Question: what triggers the data refresh, and can this be disabled for historical reports? What triggers and you guys, Kevin, you can jump in here if you need to. The way we're using it is what triggers the data refresh for us is over here. We can actually refresh the data and say to go out and do a complete data, to repull the data and bring in fresh information. Can it be disabled for historical reports? Not quite sure. I mean, if you don't want to refresh, I think you just wouldn't refresh it. I'm not quite sure how to answer that. Does that make any sense?
Craig,
what that means?
Yeah, I can take that one for a second if you want me to. The refresh can be controlled, obviously, one, by breaking the link and removing the formula, and that's what happens during distribution. If we distribute this report, we can break that automatic recalculation link. You can also do it by simply just highlighting, copying and pasting pasting the value, which will also remove the formulas. Now, that's just a couple of ways to do it. But yes, ultimately, the calculations can be turned off to where the reports become just static instead of always live.
Great. So I know we're a little over time, so I'm going to just wrap this up here in just a second. So for us, again, what is so useful to us is to be able to drill down. We'd sit in budget meetings, and someone would say, "Well, geez, could you please tell us, what made up back in 2016? What was making this up?" And again, I can just go click on drill down, and it just boom. We can look here and we can say, "Oh, that's right. We had a particular property back in 2016 that we no longer own." We can quickly identify and see it, and do our analysis on the fly like that. And I guess that's one of the huge things that it really does allow us to do, that sort of quick analysis. And again, these are things that you can do in browser, but you all know that browser really can't really make that look pretty. Things you can make look pretty in Accelerator, but you can't do the quick on-the-fly analysis like that. So for us, this has been a huge godsend. And so that's really all I had to say. So I thought maybe if you guys wanted to put Bjorn's contact information back on the screen, I'll change the presenter back to you, Kevin.
Craig, this has been really helpful, and to all the folks at NOG, thank you so much for joining. A lot of great, thorough questions, so I can tell this is resonating. So we'd love to follow up with you, but certainly if you have any questions, you see my email address here, bjorn.beer@globalsoftwareinc.com. Feel free to call me as well, but email is probably the best way to get a hold of me. But we'd love, typically what we do is, if you'd like, we can do a 30-minute follow-up session, free, just to kind of go over what your current process is like, figure out if there are, spreadsheet errors or, inefficiencies that we could remedy, and then we can, proceed to a deeper dive demo if that's what you'd like. So we like to be consultative and really understand your current processes. And we certainly look forward to doing so.
And I'll just finish by saying we first heard about Global Software from the Seattle Housing Authority. We provide housing to all of King County, which is the county that Seattle's in, except the city of Seattle. We first heard about it from them. We sent a team up there to find out more about it, and we just came back wowed and said right away, we need to adopt this. And I'm not saying it's for everybody, but for us, it has been the tool that we have decided to go with. So thank you, everybody, for participating in this webinar today. And we will be it has been recorded. We will post this on the website. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.